"Excuse me, sir, you need to leave the premises immediately." Those were the words that echoed coldly through the marble halls of one of the most powerful financial institutions in the World Bank. The security guard's voice was laced with contempt, aimed directly at a young black man in plain clothes who had just walked through the revolving doors of the towering building. Another staff member added with a smirk, "This isn't a shelter. You don't belong here. Move along before we call the police." Cameras were watching. Executives were passing by. And yet not one person questioned the treatment. But just as the guards closed in, preparing to physically escort the man out, a panicked voice suddenly broke through the tension. "Wait. Stop everything. That's the guest of honor. That's Mr. King." The air snapped into silence. Eyes widened. Mouths dropped. The guards froze in place. Mr. Elijah King, the same man who Forbes had recently named the youngest self-made black billionaire in global history. The same man who had been invited by the World Bank's own board to speak on global investment and economic reform. They had just tried to kick him out because his clothes weren't designer, because his shoes weren't polished, because his skin was black. This was not just about money. This was about image, power, race, and assumptions. Welcome to No Justice Nation, where we uncover the stories the world tries to silence. Today, we take you on a shocking, deeply moving journey that will challenge your view of status, race, and power. This is the real story of how the world's richest young black billionaire walked into the World Bank dressed like a regular man and left having exposed a system that still judges people by the surface. Now, let's go back. Let's start at the very beginning. Elijah King didn't grow up in boardrooms or mansions. He didn't attend elite private schools or inherit old money. He was born in Southside Chicago, in a neighborhood where sirens often sang louder than lullabies. His mother worked 2 cleaning jobs. His father, when he was around, did construction work until an accident left him permanently disabled. From the very beginning, Elijah's life was about survival. School wasn't easy. Not because he wasn't smart. Elijah had a mind sharper than most of his teachers, but because the system wasn't designed for kids like him. There were days he went hungry, nights when the heat didn't work, and weeks when the lights were out. Yet, despite all that, Elijah was always reading. Books became his escape, his refuge, and eventually his weapon. At just 9 years old, he taught himself how to code from old library books. By 12, he was already building mobile apps. Not the kind of apps that made headlines, but apps that made lives easier in his community. One helped local businesses manage deliveries. Another helped students schedule shared rides to school safely. He never charged for them. It wasn't about money back then. It was about impact. But as Elijah grew older, he saw something that disturbed him more than poverty. It was the way people treated each other based on appearance. He noticed how a white man in a suit could walk into any bank and be offered coffee, a smile, and full service, while someone like his mother, in her work uniform, was treated like she didn't matter. That injustice began to fuel something inside him, an idea that power could come not from imitating the wealthy, but from rewriting the rules. By 17, Elijah had already turned his coding into a profitable side hustle. Quietly, without noise, he began consulting for tech firms under anonymous pseudonyms. Most people didn't know he was a black teen from Chicago. They just knew his code worked faster, better, and smarter than anyone else's. And then came the moment that changed everything. One of the largest fintech firms in Europe reached out to his online alias. They needed help building a secure payment infrastructure for underserved regions in Africa and Latin America. Elijah took the contract. He completed it in half the time, with half the budget. When they invited him to meet in person, they expected a 45-year-old white man in a tailored blazer. Instead, Elijah walked into that meeting in jeans, a hoodie, and fresh sneakers. The room went silent. The company's CEO shook his hand hesitantly. But when the results were undeniable, the money followed. That was the beginning of Elijah King, global tech mogul. Over the next 4 years, he built his own empire, one that focused on financial access for the underbanked, one that connected microloans to small businesses in remote villages, one that changed how blockchain could work for the common person. Investors came knocking. Billion-dollar valuations followed, but Elijah kept his identity quiet. He never went public. He didn't want the fame. He wanted the freedom to move in silence. That all changed when Forbes ran an expose on the billionaire behind the blockchain revolution. His face was everywhere. Media outlets wanted interviews. Governments wanted meetings. Suddenly, everyone knew who Elijah King was, and they all wanted a piece of him. So when the World Bank reached out, inviting him to give a keynote on innovating financial equity in the Global South, Elijah accepted, but with a twist. He wouldn't arrive with his team. He wouldn't wear a suit. He wouldn't carry a briefcase or present a badge. He would walk in like a regular man, a man whose skin color and clothes would speak before he did. He wanted to see the truth. The morning he arrived, it was drizzling. He wore a plain gray hoodie, dark jeans, and worn sneakers. No one greeted him at the entrance. No one offered him a seat. Instead, as he waited quietly in the lobby, two receptionists whispered and pointed. "Probably here to ask for money," one muttered. "Or a lost tourist," said the other. He walked up to the counter calmly. "I'm here to see Mr. Anderson for the keynote panel." They exchanged a quick glance. "I'm sorry, but we don't allow non-invitees to just walk in here," the woman said. "You need an appointment." "I do have one," Elijah replied. "I doubt that," she snapped. "You can leave now, or we'll get security." And just like that, security was summoned. Not even a minute of listening. Not even a request to check his name. No verification. Just judgment. Elijah remained calm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flash his phone to prove his identity. He wanted to see how far they would go. The security guards arrived, towering over him. One placed a hand on his shoulder. "We've had enough trouble today, sir. Don't make it worse." But just before they could score him out, a junior executive came sprinting through the glass doors. "Wait! Stop everything. That's Elijah King. That's our speaker." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. The guard stepped back, stunned. The receptionist turned pale. The staff manager rushed forward, suddenly polite, suddenly sorry. Elijah simply stared at them. No anger, just a long, disappointed silence. "I see," he said. "This is how you treat people who don't look like your expectations." What followed was more than just a speech. Elijah stood in front of the World Bank's top leaders and shared what had just happened, word for word, step by step. He exposed the rot, the bias, the quiet racism behind every assumption. And then he delivered a message they wouldn't forget. Wealth isn't worn. Intelligence isn't always loud. And the future doesn't look like your past. The crowd erupted in applause, but Elijah wasn't done. He announced a $200 million initiative right then and there to build a financial access infrastructure bypassing centralized banks and corrupt institutions. A system that would empower the very people the World Bank had failed for decades. He didn't do it for praise. He did it to make sure that no child from Southside Chicago or from Nairobi, Dhaka, or Caracas would have to dress a certain way to be taken seriously. Elijah King left the World Bank building that day with the media buzzing and staff scrambling. Some tried to justify what happened. Others said it was a misunderstanding. But Elijah didn't waste time with excuses. He had bigger plans. And this was only the beginning of his global war against institutional injustice. As soon as the incident went viral, social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag they tried to kick out a king and hashtag Elijah was right trended worldwide. Videos of the confrontation surfaced. Someone in the lobby had recorded it all. The dismissive tone, the threat to call police, the fear in the receptionist's voice when she realized who she had just humiliated. Every clip confirmed what Elijah had been saying for years. The system wasn't broken. It was designed this way. But what the World Bank didn't realize was just how dangerous Elijah King could be. Not with weapons or political power, but with something far more lethal. Influence, wealth, and truth. The following week, Elijah held a press conference, not to shame the World Bank, but to announce a solution. He unveiled the Global Equity Ledger, a decentralized financial system built entirely on blockchain, designed to give economic access to people living under corrupt regimes or excluded by traditional banks. "We don't need institutions that lock people out based on clothes or color," he said. We need systems that let people in based on humanity and need. His announcement sent shockwaves through international markets. Suddenly, governments were calling, banks were scrambling, fintech investors were flooding his inbox. But power doesn't like being disrupted, and that's when the retaliation began. First, there were smear campaigns. Articles began popping up trying to discredit Elijah. One suggested he'd plagiarized his code. Another accused him of laundering money through anonymous crypto wallets, an accusation that was later proven completely false. Then came the legal threats, cease and desist letters, warnings from regulatory bodies, and even tax investigations launched without merit. It was clear someone wanted Elijah silenced. But Elijah had seen this before. He remembered how they used to treat his mother, how they'd accuse her of stealing if she stayed too long in a store, how they'd question her paycheck at the bank, even when it was legit. The tactics hadn't changed, only the targets had. So he fought back. He hired a legal team made up of underrepresented lawyers from every continent, black, brown, indigenous, women-led, and took the fight public. Then, something extraordinary happened. Whistleblowers from inside international banks began reaching out. They shared emails, leaked documents, proof that some institutions were coordinating behind the scenes to slow down or block Elijah's platform. These documents revealed systemic attempts to suppress financial tools designed for poor, because the rich knew once those tools were available, the game would change forever. Elijah released those files to the public. The fallout was immediate. Protests erupted across major cities: New York, Nairobi, Sao Paulo, Lagos, London. Activists, students, and entrepreneurs carried signs reading, "Let's bank ourselves. We don't need permission to be free." And "We are all Elijah King." Suddenly, Elijah wasn't just a tech billionaire. He was a movement, a symbol of a new future. And the pressure kept building. At the center of it all was a man who had been judged by his hoodie, not his ideas. A man who refused to wear designer suits just to be respected. A man who built a multi-billion-dollar system, not to join the elite, but to dismantle the barriers they built. But even as he rose higher, the threats got darker. One night, as Elijah was speaking at a youth summit in Johannesburg, a blackout struck the venue. Security swept in fast, and within minutes, they found evidence of a planned attack, an anonymous letter warning that Elijah King must fall or your economy will. That was the moment Elijah realized something chilling. This wasn't just resistance. This was war. But Elijah didn't hide. He doubled his efforts. He expanded the global equity ledger into 14 new countries in less than 6 months. He opened free financial literacy academies in Brazil, Ghana, India, and the U.S. He created startup grants for teen coders, kids just like he was, who had ideas but no access. And most importantly, he remained visible. He gave speeches in jeans and hoodies. He sat at investor tables with no tie. He refused to play the game of appearances because his presence alone was a protest. Then came the lawsuit. The International Finance Committee, a shadowy, behind-doors panel connected to several banks, filed a case against Elijah's company, claiming it was engaging in destabilizing financial behaviors and undermining the global economic structure. In plain terms, they were accusing him of creating tools that help poor people skip middlemen. It was a high-profile trial. Cameras lined the courthouse. News anchors speculated daily. But what none of them expected was Elijah's defense. He didn't bring lawyers to argue technicalities. He brought the people his system helped. A fisherman from Bangladesh who now sells products across Asia using Elijah's ledger. A single mother from Detroit who accessed microloans after years of rejection. A teenage entrepreneur from Soweto who launched an app using Elijah's free cloud servers. When they testified, the courtroom wept. And when the jury ruled in Elijah's favor, the world cheered. But Elijah wasn't finished. He made one more announcement that shocked the world. He was purchasing a major stake in a traditional bank, not to join it, but to transform it from the inside. "I don't want to burn the institutions down," he said. "I want to make sure the doors never close again on anyone." And so, the man who'd been kicked out of the World Bank for looking too poor walked back into the world of high finance, not begging for approval, but holding the keys, from being dismissed in the lobby to disrupting global finance. Elijah King's story is a mirror held up to the world, a story about race, class, power, and how systems treat those who don't fit their mold. In a world obsessed with image, Elijah chose substance. In a world full of gates, he built bridges, and that's why his story matters. This is no Justice Nation, and if you were moved by what you just heard, if you believe stories like Elijah's deserve to be told, then like my video and subscribe my channel for more daily videos.